Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dig into something interesting. Today, we're tackling element 14. It's funny, you might not know it by name, but I bet you've held some in your hand today. We're going to be talking AI, but also sand. Yeah,
Yeah.
you heard that right. So we're launching this deep dive with an analysis from, let me see, the Wall Street Investor Report. Got to be transparent, though. It's promoting this company, Argyle Resources. They're all about silica exploration. So, we're putting on our critical thinking caps here, really dissecting what they're saying. The thing that hooked me, they're claiming that silica, like the stuff in sand, could totally shake up how we do data storage, even electric car batteries. Sounds kind of wild, right? Luckily, we've got our experts standing by to help us separate the hype from the reality. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. It's not every day you see beaches and deserts linked to cutting-edge tech like that. Definitely fascinating to explore.
Right. I mean, usually it's all about those rare earth elements for our gadgets, not
Yeah.
sand. What's the deal here?
That's what makes element 14, or silica as it's commonly known, so interesting. We're talking about something abundant, relatively cheap, and if this reports onto something, uniquely positioned for our tech-driven world.
They made a big deal about Microsoft's Project Silica, using silica for data storage. I gotta admit, storing cat videos on something basically made of sand, pretty wild.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it, but it makes sense. AI, especially those large language models like ChatGPT, they're data hogs. All that info needs to go somewhere.
And someone's got to process all that data. The report mentioned ChatGPT might be using, get this, 10 million GPUs. Each one needs silica. That's a lot of sand.
Exactly. We're not talking about a sandbox here. If these projections are right, the tech industry is going to need a whole beach's worth of silica, maybe more. That leads us to what the report called a potential silica shortage.
Yeah, they painted a picture of demand going through the roof with AI and, well, the whole semiconductor world, and then you toss in potential supply chain issues. Lots to unpack there.
There is. They used NVIDIA, the chip company, as an example. They've been growing like crazy, mostly because of the demand for AI chips. That puts pressure on the whole system, even down to the basic materials.
And then there's the whole geopolitical angle. The report mentioned the U.S. banning silica from some Chinese companies, aiming to make 20% of the world's chips by 2030, all domestically. Could that make certain silica sources even more important?
It's definitely part of the equation. Tech and geopolitics are intertwined these days. It's not just about who can make the most silica anymore, it's about where it comes from and what it represents strategically.
Like a high-stakes game of global chess, with countries and companies battling for control of the resources that'll power the future.
It's constantly shifting. The report highlighted how companies like Argyle, focusing on exploration in politically stable, resource-rich places like Canada, might be in a good spot if demand explodes like they predict.
And we're not just talking about AI chips, are we? Silica is in pretty much every electronic device we use. The report even said the entire semiconductor industry could be worth almost $2 trillion by 2032.
Absolutely. Your phone, laptop, even your car silica's everywhere. Even if AI doesn't grow as fast as some think, the demand from the broader electronics industry is probably going to remain huge.
Good point. It's bigger than just one technology, isn't it? Silica is fundamental to our digital world. And if this report is right, we might be on the edge of an even bigger silica boom. Did you catch that part about EV batteries? Before we get too carried away, got to remember this whole analysis is coming from a report that's basically a big old ad for Argyle Resources. What caught my eye was how they're trying to, position themselves in this whole silica game.
Yeah, they've definitely carved out a niche, focusing on those early-stage exploration projects up in Canada. Smart move, considering Canada's got a reputation for, well, being resource-rich and politically stable.
Exactly. Seems like that's a big part of their pitch. But they're not just, throwing darts at a map and hoping to hit silica, right? The report mentioned some pretty high-tech stuff they're using to find these deposits.
It does seem like they're all about a targeted approach, which makes sense. We talked about that potential silica shortage, but the thing is, not all silica is created equal, right? For those fancy AI chips, you need the good stuff, electronic-grade silica. Finding that is a whole different challenge.
It's like looking for a diamond in the rough, except the rough is a whole desert.
Pretty much. That's why what Argyle's doing is interesting. Their main project, this Matapedia thing, seems huge. Over 900 hectares, they said, something like 1,800 football fields.
Oh, that's massive. But it's not just about size, right? What are they actually doing out there to find this super pure silica?
They're using a mix of old school geology and some really cool tech. The report mentioned drones with LiDAR and thermal imaging to map everything out.
LiDAR. That stuff's always blown my mind ever since I saw those crazy detailed archaeological maps they can make with it. How's it work for finding silica?
It's all about seeing what's hidden underground without digging a million holes. LiDAR uses lasers to measure distances, so you basically get this 3D map of the ground, crazy precise, that can show you tiny changes in elevation, even how the plants are growing, which can hint at the rocks below.
So it's like they're using lasers to pinpoint silica hiding underground. That's some sci-fi stuff right there. And the thermal imaging, that's about heat, right?
Exactly. Different minerals give off heat differently, so the thermal imaging helps them zero in on areas that might have silica. Combine that with the traditional geology stuff, they're building this really detailed picture of where to look.
Like putting together a giant puzzle, except the pieces are rocks and lasers. So let's say they think they've found something. What happens next?
Then the real digging begins, literally. They take these core samples, basically cylinders of rock from way down below, and send them to a lab for analysis. That's where figuring out the purity is super important.
Because they need to know it's not just silica, but the right kind of silica for all those high-tech uses.
Exactly. They use this technique called X-ray fluorescence, which tells them exactly what's in those rock samples, including how much silica there is and how pure it is. They want that top-shelf electronic-grade silica, the most valuable and the hardest to find.
It sounds like they're really going all in on data and tech to improve their chances of actually finding this stuff.
Definitely, it's a lot more strategic than just digging and hoping for the best.
And they're not putting all their eggs in one basket either, right? The report mentioned a couple of other projects too, Lac Comport and Pilgrim Island.
Right, and those are in totally different geological areas of Quebec. Smart move for spreading the risk.
For sure, like diversifying an investment portfolio. So what's the deal with those two? Anything interesting?
Lac Comport, their biggest one at almost 2,000 hectares, caught my attention because it's near an existing silica mine. Doesn't guarantee they'll find something, but it's a good sign that the geology in the area might be right for silica.
Like a clue pointing them in the right direction. And Pilgrim Island. The name itself just screams hidden treasure.
That one stood out because it's known for having a lot of quartzite, which is basically what silica comes from. The report said these quartzite formations are really easy to see on the islands along the coast, which could make exploration and even extraction easier later on.
Sounds like each of these projects has its own unique advantages. But even if Argyle finds all this amazing silica, getting it out of the ground and into our gadgets, that's a whole other beast. We've talked about the potential, the exploration. But let's get real. Say Argyle finds this super pure silica. How does it go from, like, pretty Canadian landscapes to my smartphone?
That's where things get even more complex and pricey. Finding it is one thing, getting it out of the ground responsibly and turning it into something usable. Whole other ballgame.
So it's not just, like, bring in the bulldozers and start digging.
Not quite. First off, you've got regulations, permits, environmental studies. Canada takes that stuff seriously.
Rightfully so. Can't just be digging up the planet without consequences. What kind of environmental stuff do they have to think about with silica mining?
A bunch of things. Protecting habitats, making sure water doesn't get contaminated, even dust control. They've got a plan for all of that, make sure the mine operates cleanly.
So Argyle's got to prove they can do it right, not just that the silica's there. But okay, say they get the green light. What happens to the silica after they dig it up?
It goes through a whole bunch of steps to get to that super-duper purity electronics need. Remember, electronic-grade silica, getting it to like 99.9999999999999% pure. Serious tech involved.
99.999999999%. My brain can't even process that many nines. What does that even mean, practically speaking?
It means for every billion atoms, there's maybe one that's not silica.
Right.
Crazy, right? But that's how important purity is for microchips and stuff. Even a tiny impurity can mess things up.
So like going from regular sugar to those fancy sugar crystals you see at a bakery, it's still sugar, but totally different. Right.
Perfect analogy. And like those fancy ingredients, that ultra-pure silica, it ain't cheap to make. Argyle's betting that the demand for electronics, especially with AI growing, is going to make all that work worth it.
It's wild how something as basic as sand is part of this whole global thing, you know? Supply and demand, technology, even politics.
It shows how connected everything is. Even the simplest stuff can have a huge impact on the future.
Makes you think twice about Silicon Valley being named after basically a beach. But hey, on that note, this deep dive has given us a lot to chew on. From beaches to AI, Element 14, silica, it's more than just what's under our feet. It could be a huge part of our tech future. Big thanks to our expert for breaking it all down, the science, the challenges, the potential of this honestly kind of overlooked element. And to you, our listeners, thanks for joining us. Keep those questions coming, and until next time, stay curious.